Hey everybody, welcome back to the Weekly Weed Watch. This week what I want to do is I want to highlight a species that comes up every now and then within our no-till fields. It is a perennial, so it can be a big problem, and it's one of those weeds that undoubtedly you probably dealt with or had a little bit of fun with as a kid. So let's go ahead and check out our weed for this week. Okay guys, so here is your weekly weed. You guys can see there the mix of the white seed head puffballs and yellow flowers. Our weed is Dandelion. All right, so like I said, as a child you probably took a lot of these seed heads and blew all the seeds off and watched them waft out into the air. So again, this is our weed. We typically think about this as a lawn weed or a turf weed, but it is also a weed that does pretty well in our no-till acres, whether it's no-till corn or no-till soybean. And the reason for that is because it is a perennial weed. Okay, so as a perennial, when we lack disturbance within the soil over a long period of time, perennials such as dandelion can take a pretty good grip of a field, such as this field right here. This is one of our weed science plots that's been in no-till for quite a while, and that's why you can see dandelion is a pretty heavy pressure within this field. Just to go over some really quick ID, I think most of us recognize dandelion pretty easily, but as a perennial, it does have that big, deep taproot. The leaves are, we all kind of recognize those leaves having those rosettes and those leaves with those deep serrations, almost all the way back to the midrib, and just kind of those sharp, big serrations. Pretty distinguishable, and then also the distinguishable yellow flowers, as well as the white puffball seed heads that make it very distinguishable. So again, within our no-till acres, this can be a pretty big problem if you're struggling with dandelion control within your no-till acres. The best thing we can do is to control it into the fall. Okay, so as a perennial, like many of our perennials, the best time we can control them is in the fall. And the reason for that is because in the fall, these perennials, they're going into dormancy, and they're pushing everything, all their food reserves and resources down into that taproot. And so if we spray it with a herbicide, usually we're going to push that herbicide down as well, and that's where we get a complete kill of the plant, not just killing the upper part of the plant, but also killing the taproot as well. So in the fall, an application of glyphosate plus 2,4-D and or dicamba, and if we can mix in some chlorimiron, that's the best thing we can do for controlling dandelion in the fall. Now, if you're now in the springtime and you have a field that's covered up with dandelion in front of your soybeans, your no-till soybean acres, you have to have something more than glyphosate and 2,4-D, and the best thing we can again put in there is glyphosate and chlorimiron. And even if you're in the extend system with glyphosate and dicamba, we still need just a little bit more than that, and again, chlorimiron is really the key for that. So chlorimiron is included in a lot of our residual herbicides. Chlorimiron by itself is classic, so there's lots of options out there for those products that we can get mixed into that burn down to help us out with that dandelion control. And in no-till corn, typically if we're using something that has atrazine or an HPPD inhibitor for our residual, but also getting some burn down activity out of that, most of the time we can suppress most of our dandelion with that. So typically it's our no-till soybeans where we really struggle with dandelion in the springtime. But again, the overall key is to get to it in the fall. Okay, and that is our weekly weed. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Come back next week. Check out next week's weekly weed.